Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Panel members, PCC officers, thank you for joining us today at our quarterly police crime panel. We have got a packed agenda today, so we will get started after making our introductions. My name is Councillor Keddy from the BCP ward of Queen's Park.
Is Councillor Patrick Canavan. I'm a BCP councillor and represent the ward of Boscombe West.
Councillor Andrew Starr, elected member for Dorset Council with Upton and Lidship.
Councillor Carl Wood, Dorset Council, Gillingham Ward.
And I'm Louise Bown. I'm Dorset councillor for Radipole, which is a suburb of Weymouth.
Thank you. And we are joined online by Councillor Tony Trent.
Yeah, Councillor Tony Trent, BCP councillor representing Oldham and Bourne Valley. And as I say, apologies for not being there in person.
Thank you.
I'm terribly sorry, Chair, but I have to go because there's nowhere to park my car. So I've been asked to move my car and I can't find another space, so I may be back, I may not be.
We wish you the best of luck, Councillor. Okay, agenda item 1, apologies. Do we have apologies from panel members?
So we've got a couple of apologies, Chair. So Dr. Mitten is unavailable, Councillor Flagg and Councillor Sidaway. And then Councillor Trent, as we heard just a minute ago, is phoning in from virtually. Thank you, Chair.
Item 2, minutes of the last meeting. Can we confirm the minutes included with the agenda are a correct record? I would like to propose they are. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Canavan, thank you. Mark, would you like to lead on the actions?
Thank you, Chair. So not too much in terms of actions on the last notes. We did have for child exploitation to be added to the agenda for this meeting, and that will be picked up later on in the agenda. Not identified as an action as such, but the panel did request a workshop on violence against women and girls, which may be worth asking the Police and Crime Commissioner for a comment on that.
Commissioner, could you give us an update on the planned workshop?
Good morning. Yes, indeed. My name is David Sidwick. I'm the Police and Crime Commissioner for Dorset. Regarding the workshop, it's been agreed to be held in February after the precept meeting. At the moment, we're working with STARS to identify a couple of dates that works for them, and we'll update the panel as soon as we can. If I may, Chair, I'd just like to introduce my team with me today.
Pardon me, please.
Thank you. I'm accompanied by my Chief Executive, Simon Bullock, by my Chief Financial Officer, Julie Strange, and my Director of Operations, Adam Harold. Thank you very much indeed, Chair.
Thank you, We will move on to item 3, declarations of interest. Panel members are invited to make any declarations that are necessary to ensure compliance with the Code of Conduct. Do we have any declarations of interest from members? That's a no indication from our members, including online. So we will move on to item 4, public participation. Questions from the public, I believe we have.
Thank you, Chair. So we've got one question from the public from a Mr. Kevin Brown, and I'll read that out now. Looking at the Dorset Police budget for 2024-25, it appears just over 171 million. The Office of the PCC gets 2% of this. Considering the police appear to have no capital reserves, one can only imagine that they are in fact in debt. My question is, do we have to have a PCC? Could the people of Dorset vote or petition to not have one, rather than allocating over 3.4 million of the police budget to the office of a person trying to further their political career? Would it not make more sense to scrap it altogether and employ a corporate chief executive officer style manager to address efficiency and productivity in the force?
Thank you. I would like to thank the member of the public for posing the question. Public participation is essential and it helps us a great deal with our scrutiny. To address the question, yes, we do have to have a PCC. Police and crime commissioners and their equivalents are statutory roles. The Police Reform and Social Responsibility Act 2011 sets out that there is to be a police and crime commissioner for each police area listed in Schedule 1 to the Police Policy Act 1986. Dorset is listed in the names of the relevant police areas. Therefore, Dorset must have a police and crime commissioner. I would like to hand over to the PCC and his officers for some clarity around the numbers quoted.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to take up a lot of time on this, but again, I thank the member of the public for the question. Just one point I'd like to make around the numbers. It talks about the Office of the PCC gets 2% of this. The implication is that just pays for the office. In actual fact, that includes the commissioning budget. That commissioning budget is the majority of that 2%, and that goes on reducing reoffending, crime prevention, and victim support for the whole county. So I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you. I would again thank the member of the public posing the question, and if they are on the live stream or watching the follow-up video, we will be covering under the monitoring report the commitment to make every penny count. This panel is committed to ensuring the residents of Dorset get the very best value from their policing, and this panel will robustly hold the PCC and the Dorset Chief Police Constable to account. That was the only public question we received for this panel. We do not have any petitions that have been submitted. So this will take us on to item 5, the quarterly monitoring report for Q2. So this is where we receive an update of the progress made against the police crime plan to enable the panel to scrutinise activity and assess the achievement of outcomes. Members of the panel are asked to review the performance of the Police and Crime Commissioner against the objectives in the current Police and Crime Plan. To receive any relevant updates from the Police Crime Panel, leads for each of the 6 priority areas in the PCC's plan. So we are on time for an introduction to the Q4 monitoring report. And I would like to hand over to the PCC.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. So I'll work through the monitoring report in the same way as we've done in the past, and I'll pause after each of the priorities. So the first priority is to cut crime and antisocial behaviour. So I'm pleased to show here that total crime again is down 4%. Total ASB, which is, I know, of intense importance to the people of Dorset, is down 32% versus where we were in 2019. I'd like to pick up on some highlights. The Home Office Hotspot Policing Programme. This was money given to forces across the country to increase visible hotspot patrols. During this period, a total of 1,439 hours of patrols have been delivered, resulting in 54 associated arrests, 53 stop and searches undertaken, and an additional 38 uses of ASB powers. So we're making good use of the money from government. Having said that, one of the issues, as we will no doubt come back to, is that of finance for the force. And so it is much regret that at this moment we've got the Bobby Van scheme placed under review due to the financial pressures. Now, though a success, we've concluded that we're going to have to cease that at the moment in order to hit our saving targets. I have actually said to my team in the OPCC that we need to review that. We have sequestered the vans themselves because this is about the cost of staffing until we can see what we can bring back in order to have a similar scheme. So that's what we're doing at this moment in time. I know that this will be of great interest to those of you, those members who have areas which are affected by e-scooters. And this is just one of the things that Dorset Police are doing now. They're seizing e-scooters, they're targeting areas where they know that they are particularly causing issues. And that's what we did, particularly in West Howe during this quarter. The last one that I'd like to point out is we've been trying to address the issue of shoplifting. Some of you may have seen that we did a Facebook Live presentation last week, in order to talk about the good work that's occurring. So in addition to the Operation Shopkeeper initiative, which has taken 32 prolific offenders and arrested them and got justice for those communities, we've also started something called Operation Spotter, which saw plainclothes officers patrolling, in this case in Bournemouth during September. This activity resulted in 36 positive outcomes in relation to shoplifting. So we are really beginning to give the message to those who decide to shoplift. If we have reports, Dorset Police will do something about it. I think I'm going to pause there, Chair, and wait for any questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. So priority leads for cut crime and antisocial behaviour are Councillors Woods and Trent. Do you have any questions to pose?
Yes, I have a few questions, if I may.
I guess, Councillor.
Yeah, Councillor Carl Wood, Gillingham Ward. I just wanted to ask questions on the different aspects. I'll just run through them hopefully quickly. On the road safety, the e-scooters, over what time period was that where they seized the 7 scooters? How are you targeting areas? And also, we have the West Howe example here. Is this also a wider issue across Dorset that you're looking at? Thank you.
So to answer those questions, that which I was talking about happened in September. Yes, e-scooters are targeted across the whole of Dorset. From memory, Dorset Police seize between 50 and 100 each year. They will be targeting, according to intelligence from the community saying that this is a real problem for us. And they will be looking at whether the e-scooters are also being used for other offences. And that's how they'll target on it. Does that help? Thank you.
Yep. And then if I just hop on to the hotspot policing program, how often are you reviewing the hotspots? And are you seeing, like, for example, when you concentrate on a certain hotspot, we're seeing them shift and things like that? So how is that intelligence managed, and how often is it updated where you're policing?
So I get a report, I think it's monthly, I'm looking at, yes, I get a monthly report on the hotspot policing, how it's working, where it's occurring. So it's being monitored by the force to look at what effect it's having in those areas where it is, and they're adjusting according to that. I don't know if there's anything that my team can add. Okay.
Hi, I'm Simon Bullock. I'm the Chief Executive to the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner. Just in terms of the hotspots themselves, so these are fixed hotspots. So this is coming out of a Home Office programme, a hotspot policing programme. The Home Office have set out specifically how these hotspots should be identified, and they are signed off by the Home Office. So they set out for individual forces a list of quite tightly defined criteria in terms of both geography, in terms of crime type, in terms of volume and rates. And we have identified around 20 hotspots that across Dorset Police area that focus on that area, and those are badged with the Home Office. They have been reviewed, and as a result of that review, there have been a very small amount of change. I think 2 or 3 hotspots have changed, but essentially are fixed over the life of this programme, which is a year.
And then if I move on to just the burglary aspect of the Bobby Van scheme, what effects are you expecting it to have if you have to, like, shut down that scheme? What are the knock-on effects you're expecting, and how do you intend to mitigate it if you can't fund it?
That's currently a work in progress. My team is actively looking at what effect it will have without that scheme, what we need to do to bring back that scheme or something similar. So that's very much a work in progress. This is not something that we wanted to be doing. It's not something I'm prepared to accept, which is why my team is working on it. This is a small manifestation of some of the hard decisions which we're having to take because of the effect of the national funding formula.
And then just finally, on the fraud and the cybercrime section there, are you doing any other partnership work across to facilitate that, or are you providing any other comms? Because I saw you had a newsletter, I think, online, but are there any other avenues you're using to communicate that message basically to the public?
Yes, so Dorset Police's fraud prevention officer is very active. The force uses their force communications, their social media, press releases to the press. From the point of view of partnership, the force will work with lots of partners in order to basically get their messages out. I am supporting them, particularly for this term. I said I wanted to make a difference for the elderly around fraud. So we're working with Age UK Dorset and the force in order to do a couple of things. One is a group work, getting elderly residents together to talk about the issues of cyber fraud, scamming, what fraud could occur with them and to keep them safe. And we're also looking at another technological solution at the moment, which I will bring back to the panel in the future.
Yes, thank you. That's all my questions.
Just wanted to thank Councillor Wood for the well-considered, incisive questions. We're very grateful. Councillor Starr, we'll go to Councillor Trent online as he's a priority lead, and then we'll come to you. Councillor Trent, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's a further question on electric trial bikes. I see them from time to time being ridden on the road with people not wearing crash helmets and ridden on main roads as well, not displaying number plates and quite often not showing lights. Am I right in assuming that these are technically motorcycles the same as any other motorcycle and therefore are being ridden illegally? I know that electric things shouldn't be ridden on the road anyway, but these are, I'm assuming, proper motorcycles and should be subject to all the same rules and regulations. But I just wanted to double check on that one.
Well, yes, they are illegal if they're being ridden in places they shouldn't be, if they don't have registration plates, etc., because they are motorbikes. Councillor Trent, this is, I'm pleased you raised this because this is something I've had communities raise with me before, and I've spoken to Dorset Police about it, raised it with the Chief Constable. Because the issue of trail bikes being used in places where they shouldn't be used is causing distress to communities. To make significant inroads into this problem, what we've got to do is get ahead of it. And therefore, I've asked the Chief Constable to ensure the force undertakes awareness. And this is about all of these road safety issues around single-use vehicles, if I can put it that way, to undertake awareness, particularly in the peak Christmas period. So this is about the issue of e-scooters, e-bikes, off-road petrol and electric trial bikes in particular, because that's when they're purchased as gifts. In addition to that, what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about the issue of e-scooters and then come to trail bikes. We know that they are illegal to use them on the road or public spaces. So they're illegal to be used on parks, pavements, and shopping centres. Should someone be found with a privately owned e-scooter in public, they risk it being seized, receiving a minimum fine of £300, and also, if applicable, receiving points on their driving licence. And that doesn't matter if they're a full licence holder. So I think it's really important to make those points. E-scooters, apart from in the rental trial schemes, which are occurring across the country, are illegal to use on the road or the pavement. The antisocial effect, or criminal riding, as Councillor Trent alluded to, of petrol or trial bikes is a slightly different problem. It requires a different solution and, in my view, direct action. But it can be challenging for officers on foot or in conventional vehicles to stop off-road bikers. And if they use off-road vehicles, there's potential for a dangerous off-road chase which could endanger innocent members of the public. So what else can be done? Well, I've made that challenge to the Chief Constable because I know what the communities feel about this issue. As a result, Dorset Police have agreed to trial a new operational tactic involving the use of a smart spray. So this contains smart water, which not only contains a unique forensic identifier, but also a dye which fluoresces under UV light. It's invisible, non-harmful and non-marking, but it lasts critically 3 to 4 weeks once sprayed on a suspect's clothes, skin and or property. So they will be using that tool, which will allow them to then subsequently identify the bike which was used, and they can investigate and address this issue in time to prevent it in the future. So I'm very pleased to hear about this new tactic for tackling the scurril of trial bikes, and I'll be seeking an update on its success with the Chief Constable in due course.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. So would it be police officers who deploy the spray? And also I have heard of drones being used to track the illegal use of electric vehicles?
So yes to the first question, and I didn't mention it, but yes, we are looking at the use of drones as well.
The essential question here is there funding for the Smart Spray project and drone intervention? Is this happening in a trial area, or is it being rolled out to the whole county? Thank you.
My understanding regarding the smart water is it's being rolled out to the whole county. And so there's funding for it.
And for drone interventions with EV ASB?
So we have drone capability anyway. It is, what they're looking at is they're looking at having a pilot to see if it works, and then they'll see how they can deploy those as well. I think there's possibly an example that they've used it already. I don't know if my team know any more than I do. No, not in this regard.
Thank you, Commissioner. Councillor Starr, you raised your hand.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Starr, Upton Leadership of Dorset Council. Something I probably should know about because we're talking about it, but there are an awful lot of these schemes and operations, etc., who've all got their pet little names. But could you explain exactly what the Bobby Van scheme is and why it's costing, presumably it's costing quite a lot of money, otherwise it wouldn't be targeted to be withdrawn? Thank you.
Commissioner.
Thank you for that. What I'm going to do is pass to Adam Harold, my Director of Operations, because he's the one who's looking at what we can do with this at this moment in time.
Yeah, in summary, Councillor, the Bobby Van provides crime prevention support to victims of burglary. So those who've suffered a burglary, the Bobby Van would go and then target harden the address. So that might include installing better locks, security lights, giving other advice to the victim. And it has a very high success, as has been shown in other areas, of preventing future burglaries at that address. The Bobby Van has also been providing some domestic abuse intervention as well, so taking the opportunity to go in there and to do referrals if relevant, while taking the opportunity to be with the home owner. The Bobby Van has operated with a couple of vans and 2 members of staff. The Commission is going to provide an update as we go through as to the financial challenges the force is facing. So although the Bobby Van itself, we're talking about 2 staff salaries. It's not necessarily a huge amount of people. The force is making decisions and having to reduce its headcount to save money. So what we will be doing is looking at every possible way of seeing is there an alternative way to get that scheme back up and running, bearing in mind that the vans still exist, they've been purchased, and all of the equipment as well. So a huge amount of equipment and the actual collateral, whether it be door locks, CCTV, that sort of thing, we have. What we don't have is the ongoing budgets for staff at this time. But we're hoping, and again, the Commissioner has said that it's early days, we are hoping that there might be a provider out there who, during the course of their other business and activities, may be able to come up with a solution which is not quite as costly as having two staff who solely do that. So I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you very much. The other thing that just came to light, I'm interested in this smart water scheme. It sounds a good scheme to me, because living in Upton is right next to the SSSI at Upton Heath, and we do get occasionally motorbikes using the footbridge across to the heath and disappearing into the heath and doing untold damage. But I'm a bit intrigued as how you apply that to the motorbikes. You have to catch them first and put the water on them, don't you?
No, it's and it's got quite a long distance that it can be sprayed. So I'm not going to go into what the tactics might or might not be. That is not my job as Police and Crime Commissioner, and I'm certainly not going to give it away to those people who may be deciding to do this, this criminal act.
Thank you. An intriguing prospect nonetheless, and I look forward to seeing some results of it. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions, Councillor Starr, especially regarding the Bobby van. I hope for us to touch on that further as we proceed through the monitoring report. Councillor Bown.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I wonder if the Commissioner would consider traffic violations as antisocial behaviour. I'm thinking about in Weymouth Town Centre, there are a few pedestrianised areas, and there are some drivers routinely ignore the signage and drive through. My residents have raised this with me. One of them suggested. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you're not going to put a police officer there permanently, but you know, half a day's enforcement here and there might blitz the problem, get some publicity in the local press, and bring this to the public mind. I wondered what you thought about that.
Well, I have an agreement about that, and I've been with Dorset Police, the road traffic unit, actually out with them when they're doing exactly that. I have seen them ticket people, for example, who are on the zigzag lines by zebras. So the issue is resource and being able to apply it. But I'd like to pick up on the second thing that you said, which was about the press. I have been very vocal in the past about the fact I do not think we are doing enough noise around prevention and deterrent. And partly one of the issues has been that the communications for Dorset Police had been an amalgamated system with Devon and Cornwall run from Exeter, effectively. That is changing, and we have decoupled. We now have a comms team working for Dorset and Dorset Issues. There will be a new head of communications for Dorset shortly, and I'm going to be asking them, from my perspective, on behalf of the people, to have more prevention and deterrent. And then that starts making the message around traffic violations, e-scooters, hot hatches, if I can use that term, of young people hurting around, and making the point that the police will intervene, they will sanction, and if necessary, they will seize. So I'm really keen that that will change in the future.
Thank you. I do think you swerved a bit about enforcement a little bit, but thank you for your information about communication.
Well, a terrible pun with traffic, but no, I didn't swerve about enforcement. I've been out with the road traffic police. I've seen them enforce, if you like, violations around zebra crossings, going down pedestrianised areas. I know that they will do it if they are there, and they will act on it. If the government would give me the money it should, I'd have more police cars, more road traffic units. We'd be able to do this.
Oh, that's great to hear. I hope you manage to make it to Weymouth soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bown. Do we have any other questions under cut crime and antisocial behaviour? In which case, we will move on to priority 2, making police more visible and connected, led by Councillors Bown and Gibson. Councillor Bown, do you have questions under this priority?
No, thank you.
Commissioner, that gives you the opportunity to introduce the priority area. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is the area of making policing more visible, connected and engaged. And I think what I'd like to highlight here is a couple of things. One, the panel may remember that Dorset Police took a thumping in the press around 999 calls. I think it was probably early in the new year, when a league table was talked about. What's changed since then is there's been a radical improvement in the percentage of 999 calls answered within 10 seconds. And that continues to be sustained. We are now regularly hitting over the target of 90% in 10 seconds. And even, you may have noticed there was a little storm recently, Storm Dara. There was a 50% increase in 999 calls. And even then, they still hit over 90%. I am reassured that we now have the 999 call response in a good position. I just wanted to highlight that. So there's a couple of things here. One is we had the aftermath of the Stockport murders. Dorset Police, and if I can take this a moment to commend them on the way that they dealt with those protests. They dealt with them, and I supported their approach. I spoke with the Chief Prosecutor for Wessex and the Chief Constable, and we issued a joint letter to communities highlighting that perpetrators would be brought to justice quickly, firm sentences would reflect their offending. And I think that was a national initiative which I was very pleased to support. I think that actually helped from the point of view of reducing the number of protests going forward and the strength of what occurred. Over the summer, myself and my office, we presented and engaged with 6 different summer events, things as wide as the Bournemouth Air Festival, Dorset County Show, community contact points such as in Swanage, and indeed the Little Down Family Fun Day. This gave us an opportunity to talk to members of the public and ask about their views on policing and priorities. I sense check that the policing crime plan is still valid through this sort of engagement. Also at this time, we launched the Clear, Hold and Build initiative in Bournemouth Town Centre, which I'll talk a little bit more under a different category. We've also taken on the administration of complaints and misconduct panels following a change in legislation. And these newly constituted panels are chaired by now chief officers as opposed to legally qualified chairs. I also spent a lot of the time across the summer in the engagement strategy with my office, distributing the contact and engagement leaflet, which I know we've discussed here before, because I am absolutely certain that it is about the intelligence of the community which allows, one, the police to have the intelligence to act, and secondly, to allow resources to be applied in the right places, which becomes more and more important when you are in a financial constraining situation like we are. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Members, do we have questions from the floor regarding the Make Policing More Visible and Connected area? Councillor Wood.
Yeah, thank you. Just a question on, I know in North Dorset, for example, the Shaftesbury police station is closed. The Gillingham police station is open, I think, 2 days a week. And you don't often see police walking around patrolling. In terms of engagement with the community and stuff, do you see those kind of physical places which seem to be the first to get cancelled out when there's a budgeting problem? Do you see those as a kind of almost pastime thing? Are we now looking at a world where people have to engage online with the police? Or is that something you'd want to rectify in the future and it is purely just budgeting constraints that are causing the situation as it is?
Absolutely. Your last comment there, it is budget constraints which constrain what the police can do. Having said that, we have a new neighbourhood engagement board in Dorset Police. And my office sit on it with the police. We will be looking at how to hold them to account to make certain that they do connect with the public. Now, something that we have now, which we did not have before COVID, was community contact points. So, for example, if I take the example of Verwood, what we did there was they trialled the police station opening and nobody went. They put a community contact point outside Morrison's on a Saturday morning and they were inundated with people. So there is something about changing the method of working to fit with something for the people. What we will be doing is we'll be holding them to account to check that we have the necessary amount of front office functions, and that they occur in places which people can get to. And the majority of front office functions which don't need a building, we'll look at other ways to do it. Again, I would love to have been in the position of other forces where I'm reopening more and more front offices. But actually, this has given us an opportunity to look at the usage of front offices and actually see if there's a better way. You know, more people will come to a contact point. There is more I can say about this, but I'm not going to steal my own thunder because I have more announcements in the future. But this is something which I am very clear is priority 2. It's what the people want. It's what I'm going to hold the force to account to deliver. And whether that's done in a front office or whether that's done in a contact point or another methodology, I'm going to make certain that they are with the people and talking to the people, because that's what the people want. Thank you.
Yeah, that was excellent. Thank you.
Thank you for the questions again, Councillor Wood. Are there any further questions under this priority area? Then we will move on to priority 3, fight violent crime and high harm. I will pass to the Commissioner to give us an overview.
Thank you. Yes, so priority 3, to fight violent crime and high harm. This is the one area which is the one that would keep me awake at night. This is the one which covers the issues driving violence and violence themselves. So whether this be addiction, whether it be child sexual abuse, whether this be violence against women and girls or knife crime, this is the one that causes the most discussion in order to reduce the highest harm. And I'm pleased to announce that the most serious violence still continues to fall. We're also getting more domestic abuse crime and incident reports, which is good. Most of what I'm going to talk about here deals with what my office is doing. For this one, I'm not going to talk about police operations. We did that a lot last time when we talked about the issue of drugs. So, for example, we talked about Operation Scorpion, we talked about Operation Viper. Where we are and where the office is actually trying to improve the service to victims. So we're now looking at a PCC Commission standard risk domestic abuse victim service, and we have providers who have been invited to bid. That's what we did during this quarter. We've also looked at contracts for the sexual assault and referral, sorry, what's the acronym of SARC? It is Sexual Assault and Referral Centre. So for SARC, this is where somebody would go, either self-referred or referred from an agency who had had a sexual assault or a rape. And we've recommended that we award a 7-year contract to Partnering Health Limited. So there's a long-term strategic partnership to improve the service of victims. They will have consistency for that 7 years, rather than worrying about a year's contract, for example. And we need to do that for such an important area. The other one that I will highlight here is drug testing on arrest was introduced in Dorset for VAUG offences, violence against women and girls. This resulted in 53 people being tested within custody. And we got 40 positive tests for cocaine, 2 for opiates and 4 for both. So we get a 75% rate. That's the latest number that I've got from the force. And this actually confirms what happened in South Wales in the pilot when they did this, when they had an 80% hit rate. So when people say to me, you shouldn't talk about drugs, it's a bit political, that's why I talk about it. Illegal use of drugs drives half the murders in this country, 70% the shoplifting, half the theft. And now we know when we drag people into custody for violence against women and girls, it's driving a significant amount of that harm too. So no, I won't shut up about it. We also launched the Bournemouth Together Clear, Hold, Build model. So this is about, it's kind of the New York approach which was used. It's about clearing out the bad people doing the problems. It's then about holding the ground and preventing them from coming back in. And then it's with the local authority building to make certain that the place is wonderful so they don't come back. That started in Bournemouth, and I will give progress reports as we move forward with it. I'm going to stop there and see if there's any questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. Councillor Canavan, this is your priority area. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a couple. On the SARC service, very important, really positive step to see that coming through. I wonder when we get to do the workshop in the new year, whether it would be possible to have a bit of an overview about this service, how we are providing the service to the victims, who's doing what, where, what the referral system is, how easy, stroke difficult is it for people to get access to that service. So it's just a request really as to whether it might be possible to encompass that in the work that we do in the new year. The other thing about, I just leave that with you for a second. My only other question, Chair, was about the drug testing on arrest, which the Commissioner just referred to. The 53 doesn't relate to the 91 in the table, but this is me assuming that the 91 in the table doesn't necessarily involve arrest. I'm imagining that some of that 91 may not include somebody actually being arrested. Just a question as to whether or not that assumption on my part is correct. I have recently troubled Adam on his busy email about sexual harm prevention orders, and thank you for the stats on that. It is quite concerning. I was quite concerned to see the level of those numbers, and again, within the context of what we might be doing at the workshop in the new year, whether it would be possible to just have an understanding of how that works, and you know, how your office is keeping track on it. Thank you.
Commissioner.
Thank you. So the answer to all those questions is yes, you'll see it at the workshop. So not only are we thinking about having the SARC there, but also the Sexual Trauma and Recovery Service, the STARS, and the Dorset Police, in order to talk about aspects of the whole thing around violence against women and girls. You're right, those numbers don't correlate with each other. The 91 talks about domestic violence, sexual harm and stalking prevention orders, which are used across the piece. The number of arrests, the number of arrests there, the 53 people, the 40 positive tests, that's talking about the specific ones who came into custody. for specific violence against women and girl offences. They're different numbers, different metrics. They don't correlate. The 91 is the amount used across the force in lots of different situations, not necessarily related to drug testing and coming into custody. Okay. So yes, that workshop will be a full-on workshop encompassing the whole piece around violence against women and girls.
Thank you, Councillor Canavan. Do we have any further questions on this priority area? Then we will move on to the next priority area, fight rural crime. This is led by Councillors Starr and Flagg, and I will pass to the Police Crime Commissioner.
Thank you. So with rural crime, again, what we're seeing that we are reducing the amount of rural crime versus the baseline. What I'm going to do is focus on some of the things which are changing and improving. If people will recall, we invested in the rural crime team. The one element around this which I have been trying to improve is communication with particularly farming groups. And there has been a rotating difference of opinion, if I can put it that way, as to the best way forward. So I'm very pleased that we had a meeting with the National Rural Crime Unit and a discussion of their pilot for WhatsApp engagement with local farmers groups. And that's something that I will be taking forward through the Dorset Partnership Against Rural Crime. Also of interest, I think, to members, is the fact that we've started initiating something called Heritage Watch. So we have a lot of lovely pieces of heritage in Dorset, everything from hill forts to churches. And this is a watch scheme to try and protect them, because we have criminality, everything from pinching pieces of copper or whatever from the roofs of churches to night hawking on hill forts, where you go out with your metal detector where you're not meant to. We've got a pilot which is occurring in Christchurch, and we're going to be looking at how to develop that across the county. Also of interest, I think, I am going to mention fly tipping. I was interviewed on Radio Solent to highlight the work which is going on. You may remember that I mentioned before that the investigator, which I co-fund with the Dorset area, has doubled the number of prosecutions. There has also been some quite high-profile in the press initiatives from the Environment Agency around organised crime and real large-scale fly tipping. And the last thing I'll say is the September meeting focused on wildlife crime. And we've got an action with a task and finish group to look at how we can increase public awareness of the impact of leisure activities on wildlife. So that's everything from the classic livestock worrying with dogs to things like the disturbance of bird life on the Chesil Beach, for example. So we're seeing what more can be done to actually increase awareness of the consequence of recreational activities on wildlife. And I think I'll hold it there.
Thank you for the updates. Councillor Starr.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioner. I think one of the, I'm sure you're very much aware, one of the difficulties of your job is prioritising too much, because you can't prioritise everything. However, I'm very pleased that you had, to the extent that you prioritise this sector, wildlife crime, etc., because I understand you quite considerably built up the team looking at this and responsible for this, and I think I'm very pleased about that, and just wanted to say that keep up the good work on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Starr. Do we have any further questions around the fight rural crime priority? Then, to the next priority area, put victim and communities first. Police Crime Commissioner, would you like to lead on that?
Yes, absolutely. One of the areas which is most important, one of the areas which is often in the press is actually that of criminal justice. And what we did was refresh the criminal justice strategy, criminal justice board strategy, to make certain that we've got 4 overarching themes. Provide quality support to victims and witnesses, provide an effective and efficient criminal justice service, promote rehabilitation and promote confidence in the whole of the criminal justice system. I quarterly chair the Dorset Criminal Justice Board, and as such, we review all sorts of performance measures around the criminal justice system and how to improve them. Some are within our gift, some are reliant on central government. But we needed to have a strategy refresh to make certain that it fits with what ultimately our victims need. The other thing that I did was I signed off, and this is important for an item later on today, which is about the exploitation of young people. I signed off on our youth participation strategy. This strategy outlines a bold 3-year plan. It's much supported by partners across the county to ensure we capture a wide variety of voices, young people's voices from different communities. So much of what we need to do is around prevention, and we need to make certain that our young people's voice is in how that prevention is created and delivered. We also invited providers to bid for the victim service contract. This service provides practical and emotional support to all victims of crime. That's one of the things I alluded to earlier around the funding that I use to commission. And victim support is very, very important to me. We're also continuing work with the MOJ regarding victims' code of practice metrics to make certain that those are in compliance in Dorset. I'll briefly mention that we've also undertaken a review of veterans' work to see what more we can do in that space. And following a review, we've confirmed that the hate crime awareness course through Restorative Dorset as an out-of-court disposal option can continue. I'm very pleased to see that the number of victims supported by the OPCC Commission services, we continue to help more of them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Myself and Councillor Sidaway, who sent apologies, are the leads for this priority area. I do not have a further question, so I can open that up to the rest of the panel if you have questions. Councillor Canavan.
Just a very quick one, if I may, Chair. The youth participation strategy, could you just give me a clue where I might find it, a copy of it, please?
Thank you. That's an internal document which influences our commissioning decisions.
So it's not a public document, is that what you're saying? Yes. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Moving on to the last priority area, make every penny count. We have received quite a wide range of questions for this area. We are quite significantly ahead, but I suspect we may soak up a bit of time on this one. I would like to ask questions around some strategic issues that were identified around the Make Every Penny Count area. The first question would be, the Prime Minister recently announced a neighbourhood policing guarantee with £100 million worth of funding. It includes the promise of a dedicated named officer for every neighbourhood. What are the Police Crime Commissioner's thoughts on this, and to what extent does he believe this will have a measurable and visible impact on our neighbourhood policing teams in Dorset?
Well, as a Police and Crime Commissioner, I welcome any additional funding and resources which are made available for Dorset Police. But I think it's really important to make the point the devil is very much in the detail with this, and I am waiting to see the detail of this initiative. My initial thoughts is anything that supports and aims to strengthen neighbourhood policing, I am, of course, completely supportive of. And I'd want to see the number of officers, staff and volunteers working in that area increased. Of course I would. But I think we've got to be careful that this does not come at the expense of resources taken from other areas which are equally important. So, for example, there is 13,000 mooted, an increase of 13,000. I'm not saying officers because they're not all officers, of which 3,000 officers come from the current establishments, is my understanding. Well, where are we going to take them from, those 3,000 officers? Would we take them in Dorset? Where would we take them from? What would we compromise? What harm would we allow in order to do that? So I think there is an issue on how this is put forward if it compromises the operational independence of the Chief Constable and compromises the Police and Crime Plan, which serves the people. So we'll see where we go with that. I'm also curious about other elements within that 3,000. Sorry, that 13,000. You've got 3,000 extra officers. How will the funding for that be applied? We've had previous initiatives to increase the size of the police workforce, which have been well-intentioned, but again have limited the operational independence of chief constables. I'm very keen to guard against that situation. Members will be aware of the severe financial penalties in place should the force not maintain the higher number of officers that were achieved for the Police Officer Uplift Programme. But the effect of not having the flexibility on those officers meant that last year, in the letter to me requesting a precept increase, the Chief Constable mentioned that this national ring fencing in the number of officers means that an essential piece of flexibility to the workforce mix has been removed. That means that the only place that we can change finances to a large extent is by the manipulation of police staff numbers. So on the one hand, we're being told we're going to get 3,000 more officers and possibly 3,000 PCSOs. On the other hand, the government is not doing the one thing it should do, which is get off the shelf the national funding formula and sort it. Members will be aware that unfortunately we've had to reduce staff numbers. So yes, I welcome the philosophy of giving more into neighbourhood policing. In many ways, I'm pleased the government's caught up, because this is something that I put in the Police and Crime Plan 3.5 years ago when I started it, was to address antisocial behaviour, to make certain that a neighbourhood policing team was in each area. And we've had that, and we've had neighbourhood policing contracts in Dorset since then. Indeed, that's readily available on the Force website at dorset.police.uk by entering your postcode in the Find Your Area box and then clicking on the team. So I don't know what other areas have, but we've been doing this for some time. So in summary, I welcome the philosophy of more money and more resource into neighbourhood policing, but I want to know how it's going to be delivered so it doesn't compromise us in any way going forward. The devil's in the detail, and at the moment it's a flash, and I'm waiting for the bang.
Thank you, Commissioner. Members, do we have any follow-up questions regarding this item? Okay, we'll move on to the next strategic issue. Which follows on quite nicely, actually. Can the PCC give us an update on his plans to lobby central government for additional funding?
Thank you, Chair. Look, this has become business as usual. I take it as part of the deal for the priority of making every penny count is that I lobby. And I lobby about specific things and general concerns with the highest level of government, with our local parliamentarians, with the Home Office directly. And many of our own parliamentarians in the past have given also direct representation. Specifically on lobbying the central government, since the last meeting in October, I have done the following. Launched my annual safety survey. This is a key tool to give me the information, which means I can check the plan still works for the people, but it builds a picture of current and ongoing concerns. I can stand in front of the Home Office or the Home Secretary or the Policing Minister and be very clear that I'm speaking on behalf of the people of Dorset. And so the representation I can then make to government is to make certain that they have the policing in place to respond to the issues that are important to our local communities. I wrote to Sir Nicholas Dakin, the Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State in the Ministry of Justice, to raise concerns about the ending of the turnaround programme funding in March 2025. For those who don't know what the turnaround programme is, it's a very successful initiative, helping to reduce the numbers of children entering the justice system and diverting them into more positive outcomes, and has, amongst other initiatives, enabled the recruitment of a speech and language therapist, which is absolutely critical given that over 80% of children who have contact with the criminal justice system have speech, language, and communication issues. I made a point of reaching out to every Dorset MP, particularly the new ones, highlighting Dorset's funding concerns. We had a meeting with the Chief Constable. A significant proportion of them actually had not just one, but two meetings with me about the police and crime plan, so they are well briefed. And I shared with them the letter I wrote to the Policing Ministry in August of last year and her subsequent, in my view, less than helpful response, although it did lead to closer contact between my office and the Home Office, even if it didn't talk about any extra funding. I've also reinitiated the bi-monthly meetings with MPs and asked them both individually and collectively to lobby on behalf of the people of Dorset. Now, my job is to lobby to all the people that I possibly can. And I would like them now to howl to the rafters. Up to now, we've been saying that Dorset is the second worst funded force, but now we are beginning to see that bite. We are beginning to see the hard decisions we're having to make because of this situation. I also wrote to the Home Office officials to submit an ongoing bid under the large sites for asylum accommodation grant to support the policing and community support of the Bibby Stockholm asylum barge in Portland and Weymouth. You may recall, I was very clear, I did not want Dorset people to pick up the tab for this barge. We had the first year's money, which was exactly what I asked for. We're now in bat to make certain that we get the subsequent money which we need before that barge sails off into the sunset. I have also written to the Home Secretary in respect of the 1.2% increase in employers' national insurance that has been applied to all employers, including public sector bodies, asking for further detail on the announced funding to support this increase to be made available as soon as possible. And critically, for this funding not to be allocated on the basis of the funding formula grant, given the inherent unfairness of that methodology. And I've also copied that letter with a note for myself to all MPs in Dorset. Because once again, we have a situation, as we've had before, where there is money available, but like a wage increase, it may be fully funded nationally, but if you do it under the national funding formula, we get stuffed and have to find more money ourselves. As I say, Chair, these are business as usual activities, but it's not just those which are immediately applicable to Dorset Police that I lobby on. For example, something I'm very clear, as you saw there actually with the criminal justice example, the From Harm to Hope 10-year drug strategy, which we're 2.5 years in, that is critical to continue. We had £1.4 million come into Dorset in order to revolutionise drug treatment and recovery. I went to see We Are With You, who are responsible for the administration of some of the recovery work in BCP. And they're very clear. They have a cliff edge in March. We've built this thing up. It's meant to be a 10-year strategy, and then we're going to take money away? And by the by, there was never any money put in for prevention. Now, we've moved from a position, through my lobbying with the portfolio, we've moved from a position of, my first conversation with the policing minister, it was, well, actually, we're focusing on safer streets and cutting VORG and cutting knife crime. Through 3-4 months lobbying, we've now moved that the government and the policing minister is talking about the issue of drugs because, as I've said to her, you won't cut VORG. You won't cut knife crime. You won't touch it unless you address the issue of drugs in our society. And you can't do that with enforcement alone. You can't do that with treatment and recovery and enforcement. You have to have prevention. So my lobbying continues, as you can see, on a broad range of fronts, but it all focused on improving what we can get here to make it better, because that's the job I've got to do for the people of Dorset. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that update, Commissioner. So, for my own understanding, everything really hinges on the national funding formula for policing, which the government have not released yet, before we have any real capability of being able to plan. There's currently no extension of existing government grants, for example, the serious violence duty. There's no feedback on the violence reduction unit funding that was promised previously. And previously funded programs, for example, From Harm to Hope, are facing a cliff edge at the end of the financial year. This does sound like a very serious situation.
The one that I have hope for is the From Harm to Hope. I think that penny has dropped. I have a meeting next week on drug policy with the key person in the Home Office to discuss it. The policing minister in the last meeting I was with her at referenced From Harm to Hope and referenced Combating Drug Partnerships, which is the local implementation of that strategy. And therefore, I am hopeful that that will be taken into account when we see the grand plan from government. But at this moment in time, there are so many moving parts and so many concerns. I had Youth Justice talk to me about their issue to allow me to help them to lobby. I know we've got an issue around if From Harm to Hope didn't continue. What would that look like? We go back to having less treatment and recovery. So at this moment in time, it's very much a let's see. As Tom Cruise said, show me the money.
Thank you, Commissioner. Members, do we have any follow-up questions to that statement? Councillor Bown. Is that specifically on this? Okay, if it's a different area.
There we go. Thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Chair. So I'm delighted that you're doing all that lobbying, and I'm also appalled that you have to. I'm just wondering, in real life, what effect do you think your lobbying will have? Do you see, is there an end in sight for you, or do you think you'll just be howling, into the abyss?
What a brilliant question, Councillor. I am an optimist at heart. I started this lobbying lark at the start of the first term. We won. We won the argument on seasonality. We won the argument on rurality. We won the argument on the national funding formula. It was done. We were told it was done. Those things were taken into account. It is sitting on a shelf in the Home Office. Now, there are going to be winners and losers when that comes out. And the only thing that I can think which is stopping it coming out is that the winners are big forces. Well, I'm sorry. This thing has been unfair for years. I am optimistic because when the barge came, I was told I wouldn't get any money. In the end, I got everything that Dorset Police needed in order to make that work. It was robust. I had a couple of conversations with the minister, but we got there. Even since July, and I understand the whole issue of, we're coming into government, there are we've got to find our feet, we've got to, all the rest of it. But the drugs piece around From Harm to Hope has moved from where it was when I first had the conversations in July. So I am optimistic, but I have to say, and I may return to it, taking that thing, that piece of work which was done, and taking the national funding formula off the shelf and applying it is the most important thing the Home Secretary could do to affect policing in this country. As long as it stays where it is, locked in the too difficult box, then we will continue to have challenging situations. Because this has been going on since 2013, don't forget. And those who win can have all the toys they need to basically affect change. They can build up reserves. Every time there is money for extra officers, some forces gain above. We get stuffed when it comes to almost every measure, whether it be wage bills, I'm worried about the national insurance, even other grants are applied according to the national funding formula. Now, I know that with the support of the MPs, as has occurred in the past, last year I got over £4 million, last term I got over £4 million into Dorset from various places, including the Home Office. I know if we are brave, we are consistent, and we don't stop and howl at the rafters, then we will, in the end, affect change. And I'm not going to stay silent on this. It is heartbreaking to have to take the decisions. The Bobby van is one of them. This is at the door of government. The national funding formula, the work was done. We'd won the argument. It needs to be applied. So I am optimistic. We'll just keep going.
Oh, thank you. And I know the plans aren't in place yet for potential devolution, but I think we all know it's coming in local government. So I wonder if you think that might make a difference to central government's willingness, if we might be a big hitter if we were to become a devolved authority, part of a devolved mayoral authority or similar.
It's really interesting because the devolution plan, as I understand it, is Wiltshire Local Authority, Dorset Local Authority, and Somerset Local Authority. And the idea is to build another structure, a mayoral structure above that. I'm not going to comment on whether that's a good or a bad thing. That's not within my remit. What I will comment on is if we look at the mayoral system for policing, my personal view is that doesn't work. If you look at the forces which have mayors, they have significant issues around crime. I know that being a elected representative by the people of Dorset to look at one thing, then I drive on that one thing, and that one thing gets done. And in many ways, it's one of the most important things, because keeping people safe is absolute paramount. So I have a view on whether an elected mayor and policing is the right thing. But actually, if I can make a point, Avon and Somerset have a directly elected mayor in Bristol, but they still have a PCC which works for them. And I think from the point of view of policing, I think that's the way to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Councillor Bown. We are joined online by Councillor O'Leary, who would like to ask a follow-up question regarding the lobbying question. Over to you, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Smashing. I touch on what Councillor Bown said was around this. The thing of devolution is, the problem in this country is, it holds, basically we hold all the cards national government hold all the cards, and basically what is devolved in terms of local government and police and crime commissioners have to sort of rely on what comes down from them. Obviously, Dorset Council and others are going to be entering in negotiations with ministers and others. Will you be involved in separate negotiations or in those negotiations and see what you can get? Because it's also not just about money. It's about, if you could get more responsibility and more powers, then I think we'd all welcome that as a transfer of power from central to yourself. And I thought it was interesting what you said about the mayoral authority. I thought Mayor Sidwick did have quite a ring to it, but obviously you're not keen on that, and neither am I, because it does concern me. We're going to have another tier of authority over us. So I'd be interested to see your thoughts on whether you could get more power as well as more money potentially from those negotiations.
Okay. Personally, I'm not a great desirer in building empires. It's got to work for the people. I am involved in negotiations around a whole plethora of local government situations via the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners. So that's how I do my lobbying in this regard. Now, if somebody wants to invite me to the devolution talks, I'll go, because I have to make certain that what works stays working, if you see what I mean. If it means that actually the mayor, well, I'm not certain how it works actually, because in the press release I saw that the local authorities said they all stay and do the same job. So you know, I'm confused as to what the mayor adds at the top in that regard, apart from one person that the government can talk to. So I think I'm going to have to wait and see how it develops. If somebody invited me to talk about it, I'd be very happy to go and talk about it. Because fundamentally, the thing that is working for us here with policing is the fact that we have a police and crime plan which was heavily researched with the people across 3 years, became manifesto commitments, and then became priorities. And those priorities are exactly delivered by the force. That democratic golden chain of linkage gets diluted in a mayoral system when it's one of the things they will be doing. And the person who actually drives the PCC function within a mayoral system doesn't have to go and see residents because they're not getting elected, doesn't have to do the things I do to keep constant with the people. And that would worry me. Because at the moment, if a community is upset about their policing, they can get hold of me, and by heck, I'll try and help them do something about it. When was the last time a large metro mayor with responsibility went to a small community on their patch and listened to the residents? So I'm not convinced about it, but I'll certainly come and talk to anybody about my position on it if that's what's required.
Councillor Leary, are you satisfied with that response? Do you have a follow-up?
No, I'm happy with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any other follow-ups to that particular question? So that covers the lobbying question, which was one of the strategic make every penny counts questions. I'm conscious that the PCC didn't get their lead into that priority area. If there were comments before we move to the sub-questions.
Chair, I think I'm being pretty clear what the main issue is. I won't rerun that in this context of the make every penny count. I may return to it depending on what questions I'm asked. What I would like to do, though, is I'd just like to make a couple of points here. One point I also should highlight is this shows where my commissioning spend occurs. That goes back to the public question earlier. So I should just highlight that is how we basically show you what we're doing here from the overall number. So during this time, I've spoken here about Right Care, Right Person in the past. Phase 2 of Right Care, Right Person went live in July. This latest phase aims to ensure that patients who leave unexpectedly from healthcare settings, such as hospitals and mental health establishments, are provided with care from the right service, and police officers are not routinely called to locate patients. Now, I understand that phase 2 was initiated, and it's been initiated well. We are now been able to work towards phase 3, and shortly, I believe, we'll be starting phase 4. So I just wanted to show that this is completely on track and moving forward. I won't repeat the comments about the general election and meeting with the new and returning MPs, because I kind of did that. Dorset Police launched phase 2 of Direct and Deploy, an initiative to further improve the timeliness and quality of emergency call handling and dispatching. So this enables officers to undertake routine tasks historically completed by call handlers, and it's meant that Control Room has more capacity to manage both emergency and non-emergency calls. Now, I spent an evening, a Friday night, with the teams in the contact centre, both with those receiving the calls and those in the dispatch centre. I was impressed with the passion and the attention to detail which they were using to drive things forward in order to do that. And I talked about the 999 numbers earlier. I'm certain there'll be a question on it. So we did, during this quarter, launch the Mutual Agreement Resignation Scheme, MARS, to help balance the budget. The scheme invited members of staff to voluntarily resign for a one-off tax-free payment. The roles would then be deleted or the tasks absorbed elsewhere, allowing the force to make savings. So I'll stop there now and see if there's any questions.
Thank you, Commissioner, for that overview of making every penny count. We do have a question around Mars, which has been submitted in advance. I will lead straight into that. So, within the last few weeks, the Echo published an article. In fact, it was on the 4th of November, with the headline, Dorset Police axes 78 jobs to save millions of pounds. Can the PCC provide an update and overview on Project Mars, including what it is, how it's operated, as well as the impact he believes it will have on frontline and community policing? There are follow-up questions which may be addressed in your response. In particular, there's a reference made to voluntary resignation. And could you include in your answer the difference between voluntary resignation and voluntary redundancy? Thank you.
Okay. Well, members will know why we've got to do this. The issue with the national funding formula and the way that this has had cumulative effects over years and years and years. Chief Constable and I are in complete agreement that that needs to be sorted. It needs to incorporate the issues of seasonality and reality, which we've spoken about. We would also call for greater certainty in, rather than having this 1 year uncertainty every year about what the budget's going to be. Let's support a call for a multi-year settlement covering at least 3 financial years. There need to be caveats to ensure that external factors, such as inflation, pay awards, and pension changes, are adequately funded. But a long-term settlement would be better for the force. They'd be better able to plan. Similarly, we don't have a capital grant. Restoration of that would enable us to invest in innovation, deliver efficiencies, and maintain an asset base that is fit for purpose. We still try and do those things, but we don't really have the ability to do them as quick as we would like and as wide-reaching as we would like, because we don't have a capital grant. Somebody asked me about front offices and police stations. We have to borrow to build anything. Custody suite, North Dorset. I've had North Dorset howl for a custody suite there. That would be £20 million. Without a capital grant, we couldn't do it. I strongly believe that the overall reduction in real-term funding, and without the need to be flexible around the workforce mix, has caused us significant issues. We talked about it earlier. Great that we've got the largest number of officers in Dorset for a long, long time. But it's no good if we're now having to ask some of those officers to do police staff roles because we have to lose the police staff. It is daft to lose somebody with years of experience doing a job and then replacing them with somebody else with no experience who possibly costs more because of the perverse accounting rules around this. So we've had to take a number of emergency funding measures. And on the 2nd of September, we launched the MARS scheme, the Mutual Agreement Resignation Scheme. That was alongside an existing recruitment freeze. The idea was that we would realise savings and balance the in-year budget. So it's a scheme whereby members of police staff who are not posted in operational critical roles, and that's important. So the force looked at it, and if you were in an operational critical role, such as the contact centre or detention and custody, you would be offered this. And so they can choose to apply to leave the force with a severance payment of £14,500. The important elements are that it's entirely voluntary. There were no individuals, teams, or specific areas of the force targeted, nor was there a target number of resignations being sought. This is a resignation scheme rather than a redundancy scheme. There is a specific legal definition for a redundancy to occur which is not met here. It protects rather than affects the police officer uplift programme. Dorset Police is still maintaining the target number of officers that was achieved through uplift. So this is the perverse situation that we find ourselves in, where those officers were meant to be in the places the people wanted them to be, and we're having to make decisions around where they are based on the mitigation now of this scheme, because the only place that we can cut costs for the force of a significant nature to address the savings required is with police staff. Now, what have we done around the mitigation of this? It's given an opportunity because we now know who has applied for that scheme. So I had a meeting with the force on Monday with my team, and we went through the affected roles in detail, and we challenged the chief to set out where they were being lost from and what would happen. Would they be backfilled? Which means taking someone, an officer, possibly, or another member of police staff from elsewhere. Would they be ameliorated? Would it, was it possible to look at a service in the same way as right person, right care? Were we doing over and above actually what we were designed and committed to do? Could it be delivered differently? Could it be delivered innovatively? We're going to hear about technology later on. So all those challenges are in place. And the other piece of the work is, as you heard earlier, is my staff and I will be looking at if there is something we can do to pick up or to help or to go out to an outside supplier or to get done in a different way, where we agree that there needs to be that service provided. It's fair to say it is the most challenging and difficult conversation. You're losing good people. Dorset Police is a small force. They know those people who they're losing. And we wish them well, because those who have taken the decision may be going on to something else. I'm pleased that it was an open and transparent conversation. We laid bare the effect of all the changes. We collectively set out how they need to be mitigated, and the force is working through the exact detail of that at the moment. They now know what needs to happen where. They need to put that into place, and I'll be monitoring that through further boards in order to make certain it happens. We need to ensure also that how this spins out, the collective measures taken act in concert with one another. So we've got an overall effect which has a meaningful and sustainable impact on public service delivery. The mantra for the force, the clear priority I've said to the Chief Constable since this whole issue had to be addressed, is the preservation of the police and crime plan has to be a top priority. And that is what this is intended to do. It is not right we're having to do it. It is not right that the Home Office haven't got the national funding formula sorted. It is not right that we have the haves and the have-nots in policing because of this national funding formula. But if we look at this in the round, we still have a significant amount of money. We still have a large budget. Dorset Police is a force which is working well. We look at the measures. Crime is down. Arrests are up. Antisocial behaviour is down. If the Home Office isn't addressing this because they think we're fine, I'll remind them, and you'll see later on, some of the real issues we have in Dorset around the issue of drugs in our society, the 9th highest place for heroin and crack cocaine use, the issue of violence against women and girls, the issue of knife crime and our young people are carrying too many. We have the same issues. Give us the money to fix it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think I speak for many in the chamber that it is very hard to hear the outcome of the sharp end of this the funding constraints that we're facing. I do have some follow-up questions. So under police staff reductions from Mars, the reduction in some of the services that we've already heard of, the Bobby van, but also safer schools, the Victim Bureau, licensing. These are areas that have been affected by Mars. The point of great concern is that while we are engaging in this emergency funding measure to protect officers gained in the uplift programme, we are reducing staff numbers, which is requiring officers to do police staff jobs and potentially taking them out of our communities and out of frontline policing availability.
So that's what we're working through at the moment. That's what the force is working through at the moment. They will endeavour to preserve the frontline situation. As I said, some of the things they're looking at, how can they work differently? Is there something that that team is doing which actually is above and beyond? Are they picking up work which another agency should be doing? And yeah, we know the right care, right person situation. So they are looking at that situation as well. It may be that an officer is redeployed from another area. This is not an easy thing to do. It is complex because of the domino effect elsewhere. But they know very clearly, the Policing Crime Plan, they know the government has said they want neighbourhood policing and safer streets. So we're all trying to preserve that. But what they can't do, right, and here's the wicked problem. This is why the national funding formula is so critical to get sorted. If that was sorted, a lot of these issues would go away. You can't take people away from doing tasks which the public may not even consider. So, for example, the issue of child sexual abuse, the issue of paedophiles abusing children, I ever so rarely get raised with me at residents' meeting. I get drugs, I get ASB, I get rural crime, I get road safety. But that doesn't get raised. But that is an area of high harm. That is an area not only of high harm for the individual now, but high harm for that individual going forward for their entire life. Is the Chief Constable going to make decisions to take officers out of there? So, the constraints are tight. My mission is to preserve what the people of Dorset want and the Policing Crime Plan. We will do everything we can. And the meeting on Monday was very productive. Some of those areas that you mentioned, there is a different way of doing business, they believe. There is something they can accelerate maybe with robotics, which means that they can mediate the situation of not having that person. So all those things are now in play. And in a way that this constraint has forced us to do, well, we would rather have the police staff doing the job that they're doing. I am not content to let crime become bad so we get extra funding, and nor is the Chief Constable. So we'll do everything we can to mediate the situation of 78 staff members having to leave the organisation. But let's be clear, there are going to be some effects, as we've seen, for example, which is why I highlighted the Bobby van situation earlier. Does that help?
Thank you, Commissioner. I do have a further question. The wording of voluntary resignation versus voluntary redundancy, are the staff roles being made redundant, or might they be refilled in the future? Sorry?
So we're getting into the technicalities now. I'm going to get my Chief Executive to go through that piece with you.
So I am by no means an HR specialist, so this is a heavy caveat. This is my understanding of the situation from not a technical standpoint. But in my own head, I think the way I'm thinking about it is that resignations are employee-led and redundancies are employer-led. So essentially, if you're making a post redundant, the organisation will come to a conclusion that the post is no longer required. And that has an impact on the employee. So that's an employer-led decision. With a resignation, the employee has decided that they will voluntarily resign. So it's employee-led. That's the difference. So a resignation is not a redundancy. So obviously there is a desire, a strong desire to make savings, but as the Police and Crime Commissioner has talked through, there will be they're backfilling those roles does remain an opportunity for some of those roles, but obviously we haven't got the capacity to do that right across the piece. Is that helpful?
That is a great help. Thank you for the clarity. Yes, I realise I have monopolised this question a little, and I would like to offer it to the room. Councillor Canavan.
Yes, so apologies because this is my employment law background. There is a very significant difference between resignation and redundancy legally. Redundancy is not always employer-led, by the way, but the difference is, and the Commissioner referred to it in passing earlier, if somebody asks to resign and there is a package of measures available to support them in that role, then that is something which they are doing voluntarily. What the force then has to do, and again, the Commissioner's touched on it, the force then has to think about, well, what are the consequences of letting that person go? And the difference is that with a resignation, if the force wanted to, it could backfill that job. It could replace that person. With redundancy, they're not allowed. You're not allowed to do that. So in the voluntary redundancies exercises that we've seen within local government, the caveat of all of those is if you take it and if it's agreed, they don't fill the job behind you. And that is quite a significant difference because it means that that the organisation is not only the person short, it is the role short. And that's really quite crucial. I think sorry to bore you with all of that, but the question I was going to get around to is the scheme directed, not necessarily intentionally, but is the consequence of the scheme meaning that this is primarily officers that are going as opposed to staff that are going? If the consequence of the scheme is that actually the take-up is more on the part of staff, is there then a consequence of actually the result of then meaning that officers are then being asked to do more of the support staff's work, if you see where I'm going with that question?
Thank you, Councillor Canavan. Because of the accounting constraints with the uplift, the chief can't manipulate officers. If we were to not satisfy our uplift targets, we are fined significantly for that. So this scheme was only offered to staff. So your assertion there, yes, is the answer. In some cases, depending on what happens to that role. And that's why we did it. It was done that way. In some cases, it will be backfilled because it's a role which is perceived, what that person was doing needs to be done. In some cases, it will be changed and possibly a robotic process put into place if it was more of an administrative position. In some cases, yes, officers will have to pick up a little bit of what the staff were doing. And unfortunately, that is the wicked problem we've got. In some cases, in some forces, I understand they're even looking at officer reduction and taking hits there. We haven't got to that stage, and that would be worse for us at this moment in time.
About the pressure, financial pressure, and whether there is a prospect of that scheme being applied to officers.
Yeah, so there's no plans for that, and it's impossible with the counting arrangements that we've currently got.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Canavan. Are there any further questions around the effects of Mars on Dorset Police's ability to manage our community and frontline policing? Okay, I think we have covered that quite thoroughly. And I thank you for the very direct responses on this.
I think there is no merit in not showing the panel the stark reality of where we are. The one point I will make, just in case anybody was misunderstanding it, is the Mars scheme was offered to staff who are not operationally critical roles. I think that's important. Yeah, that's important. From the police's end, they wouldn't offer it in certain parts which actually are integral to making certain that the force works. I just wanted to offer that reassurance. I'm also reassured by the meeting I had on Monday and the way that actually the reality is exposed and the mitigation is being discussed and how it's going to work in each area. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. So the next items on the agenda are the key lines of inquiry papers that have been generated. I might suggest that as we're approaching 2 hours in, it may be a good opportunity for us to have a comfort break. Reconvening 10 past, do you think that's reasonable? 10 past 12 in the chamber. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. We will now proceed with the panel. We have two key lines of inquiry. The first is a paper into child exploitation led by Councillor Canavan. This has led to the production of a paper from the Office of the Police Crime Commissioner. I commend this paper. It goes into huge depth. The issues and the numbers behind incidents in this paper are disturbing. But I would hand to, I think, Councillor Canavan to introduce and for yourself to respond, Commissioner. Councillor Canavan, would you like to introduce the item?
Do it actually, but no. Well, look, thank you very much indeed for this report. It's, I think, comprehensive would be to understate it actually, and I'm really grateful to Rachel and Jadam and the team for the work that's gone into producing it. I said to a colleague the other day who I sent it to, because this really started with a question that I was asked by a fellow councillor who's looking at child exploitation from a slightly different angle. And I thought, well, actually, I wonder what the police are doing about it. And you almost regret asking the question, don't you? Because it is so involved. But there were a couple of things that came out of it to me. One was that the position nationally is really quite concerning, that the statistics that this paper reveals are really quite worrying. And although Dorset doesn't look too bad in comparison to the really bad, I think the worry is still not just on the level, but the point that I think is reflected in the paper, that there is still that worry about underreporting. And I don't, I mean, you can do everything, chuck everything at it, can't you? And you're still faced with the problem of people not reporting it. And you just have to keep, I guess the answer is you just have to keep trying and trying different things to get and encourage people to report these incidents. But it does do two things. Does it mask the true level of child exploitation in the county? Possibly does. We're never really going to, I guess, fully understand what that level of underreporting is. But I think it is something which obviously is very much under review, and that's the encouraging thing about this paper, that there's so much work going on in this area. So there's two things really. One was this whole question of the involvement of young people, which is where all of this started, really. So I was really pleased to see the work that was being done to try and engage with young people. And that's why I asked the question earlier about the youth participation strategy. Because there is a question posed in this about whether or not young people actually want this. And all I can do is share the experience that we've had within BCP in terms of our Children Overview and Scrutiny Committee, where we've involved people from our youth parliament, and that has been hugely beneficial because not only are they engaged, they're doing their own stuff as well. So they are generating activity which involves young people, which adds, to the sum total of our understanding of the situation. So they're not relying on anybody else to do it. They're doing it themselves. They're building up their own networks. And that is hugely valuable because it's something which I think we would, and those of us of a certain age might struggle to do. So that's been hugely beneficial. So anything, I think, that allows that or encourages that to happen has got to be good news. And we just have to keep trying and see what works best. But getting young people to drive that, I think, is really critical. So I was really pleased, really pleased to see that. And the other issue really was about, this comes back to my point about underreporting, really, that the community intelligence bit of this, is so central, isn't it? And how do we as councillors, how do we as just ordinary residents help get or encourage people to give that intelligence to the people that they need to give it to? So one of the recommendations is that we as councillors be asked to help with that community intelligence scheme, and absolutely would welcome. I just think you need to give us a clue about what it is you'd like us to share, because I wouldn't want to share stuff which was not something that you wanted us to share. I mean, what we will do, obviously, is you say, right, okay, if you've got a problem, this is who you report it to. But I would be much more comfortable in a situation where we were encouraging people to report things in a way which was the most efficient in terms of getting it into the system, if that makes any sense. It's not any reluctance. I just want us to encourage people to do it in the right way, to the right people at the right time. So any sort of idiot-proof guidance that you can give me would be most appreciated. But that's it from me. And just finally, a big thank you for the report. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Canavan, for your introduction. Commissioner.
Well, thank you very much indeed for what you said, Councillor Canavan. I'm very pleased that we did this subject justice. It is an area which you will know I am very passionate about, particularly around one element of child exploitation, county lines. That is something which we have made certain is on the agenda of the police, but also of bringing charities, for example, Escape Line into Dorset. They weren't here before. Escape Line does a phenomenal job. It has within its ranks people who have been in county lines, and it seeks to increase awareness and also to help parents understand the signs in order to basically try and help the young people not get into them or stay out of them or get them away from the gangs who are there, who are trying to exploit them. I think it's stark because if you were to say to a layperson, talk to me about child exploitation and child sexual abuse, they would probably talk about the stereotypical paedophile or at home looking on the computer. This paper doesn't look at that deliberately, and I'm grateful for that, because it starkly highlights that it's a friend, acquaintance, or colleague who's top of the tree in causing this exploitation and possible sexual abuse. And I think that's a really, really important message. What you asked for, from the point of view, we'll take as an action, and we'll let every councillor know here's where's best to report what. The guidance of what to report, that may take a little while. We may need to talk to some of the agencies, but we'll come back to you with that. I'm pleased that the panel wanted to look at this. I'm pleased that we've now been able to show you the amount of work that's going on there. I think that work will continue. It's partly the reason why I want the government to give a higher priority around the whole issue of drugs and their use and supply and the associated issues with that, and the exploitation of young people which occurs with that. I don't think I'm going to say much else because the paper is pretty comprehensive. Apart from this complex area will remain a focus both for us as the OPCC, and we'll hold the force to account around the issue of what they're doing with child exploitation and child sexual abuse going forward. I'm prepared to take any other questions from other councillors on this paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I just wanted to comment on some of the statistics that are touched on here. As I progressed through reading this paper, I was, it is gut-wrenching what the children of Dorset are being exposed to. It's reassuring that Dorset is low down the league table, but as Councillor Canavan points out, we cannot quantify the underreporting element. But a large driver of future issues of addiction and substance misuse is quantitatively born out of adverse childhood experience to an extent that is really quite shocking. Adults who lived with 6 or more adverse childhood experiences are 46 times more likely to become an intravenous drug user and 35 times more likely to attempt to end their life by suicide. I find that absolutely shocking. And it really underlines where the root cause of these issues lies, in the roots of trauma, and that taking a public health approach to dealing with these issues should be a priority. The other statistic that really got my attention was the 22-23 figures, where 1,070 child sexual offences were recorded by police, and it is estimated that 12,160 children were sexually abused in Dorset. I almost feel like I need to quantify that number. 12,000, that's in item 2.4 in the paper. I guess, well, assuming that isn't a typo, that really shocks me to my core. You mentioned issuing guidance to members on how to engage, how to report, how to highlight safeguarding concerns. I think we would all very much welcome that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, those numbers are right. That is the scale of the numbers. And I think this goes back to some of my themes in the rest of the meeting, to be honest, is we're not just beaches and chocolate box villages. We have the same issues. And government has got to wake up to that and do the right thing. And also do something else, is if a significant amount of this is being, as we believe, driven by organised crime groups. And those organised crime groups are using those kids to make money in lots of different ways, let's be frank. Lots of ways I'm not going to go into. But fundamentally, we've got to make certain we are cutting off the income streams which they are trying to acquire. And that means it's got to be a total society project, if you like, in order to address it, driven from the top. Not pick off individual pieces of it and hope that you're going to address those. You've got to look at it in the round. You made the point about adverse childhood experiences. I was on a meeting with the Home Office yesterday about the new suggested prevention partnerships which may come in. And one of the things that we needed to address with government was this can't be a prevention partnership just around teenagers. The youngest child that I'm aware of being used for county lines, not in Dorset, is 6 in a neighbouring county. I know that when I was a candidate, a teacher, no names, no pack drill, came to talk to me about the fact that they were really worried about what was happening in their playgrounds and the way the kids were talking about drugs. If we don't get addressed, if we don't get ahead of that, and with that comes something else. Misogyny and those issues are also driven from a young age. We need to get on top of that. There's something about not just putting the sticking plaster on from 11. There's something about going earlier. Now, I always talk about primary schools going early. In America, they're ahead of us. They're talking about kindergarten going earlier. I would say possibly you need to go even earlier. When somebody is pregnant, what sort of family life is that kid going to have? What are the constraints there? What are the issues there? What are the adverse childhood experiences they could be exposed to? Can we somehow link this all up? At the moment, the same children and young people with issues may come to the attention of police, social services, health, I could go on. Are we linking that up? In Denmark, there is a single person identifier number, so you can link up all the databases. These are the things we were talking about yesterday. Because you're right, just putting a sticking plaster late on when somebody has had the problem isn't enough. We've got to try and get ahead of it and make prevention live in this country.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I'd like to extend my thanks for the generation of the paper from the officers present. Members, do we have further questions regarding the paper and its contents? Councillor Bowen.
More of a comment than a question. I think it's just so thorough that you haven't left us with many questions, really. But I mean, I'm going to come back to one of the themes I always come back to, which is, do you think we are having an effect? I mean, obviously it sets out the problems very well indeed. And I'm just thinking, I'm just wondering, do you think, do you think we're using our resources to best effect?
The resources we've got, I think, yes, absolutely. I'm interested to see how this prevention partnership develops, the idea behind it. I'm interested to see what funding comes with it and whether that funding is directed. Let me be blunt, as I think you've probably got used to me being. It needs to have real outcome measurement and real action and grip. If it's just something warm and fluffy with a nice headline, it will not affect a thing. So that's why, again, the devil will be in the detail. I think the money that we've got, we're using very effectively. I know, for example, in a way that wasn't so strongly fixed before, we're addressing the issue of county lines. Operation Scorpion happened, number 10 of Operation Scorpion happened last week. And we closed, in that week, we closed 2 more county lines with significant harm removed from the equation. We've got to keep on doing that aspect to it. But we've got to somehow really fund prevention at all levels. You talk about the public health approach. So yes, at the very top tier, those people who are already beginning to be in criminality, already most vulnerable, yes, but we've got to start working on our young people at all tiers, including the general population, in order to get an understanding around some of the harm which occurs and to try and help them not get into it. not make the decisions for them, because you can't stop a teenager pushing the red button, and if you try, that actually can make it worse. But making certain there is programs and enough youth workers and that the messaging is right in order to keep our young people out of trouble. And your point is well made. It has to be co-produced. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Bown. Do we have any further questions on this subject? Councillor Starr.
Well, perhaps not a question so much as an observation. It strikes me that if we deal with, I'm talking internationally really, if the West deals with the drug problem, so many of these other problems will be diminished considerably. And it strikes me that when you see programs about people in poor South American countries where they're run by the drugs cartels, etc., and the people who are growing, often the people who grow this stuff, they're doing because they're in extreme poverty and they can get a lot more money doing it this way. Well, I think personally there's too much emphasis on them. They wouldn't exist at all if we weren't buying the stuff. We need to really clamp down on drug use, not just the dealers and the suppliers, the drug use. The drug users is becoming quite often now, you see on television people referring to white powder, etc., in a jokey kind of way. It's considered something that is almost socially acceptable. But this is the key that feeds the problem all the way down the line. And I don't think there's any easy way to do this without dealing with the people, stopping people using this damn stuff in the first place. Thank you.
So you are, of course, right. I have no time for celebrities who celebrate illegal drug use. I have actually gone public on my opprobrium around those. They're role models. Kids look up to them. What the heck do they think they're doing? That's what I talked about there being first funding for prevention, but also the penny's got to drop mentally that we need to do exactly what you're talking about. The problem is we know what works, we know what doesn't work with drug prevention. So the Zamo, Grange Hill, Don't Say No, doesn't work. So what we've got to do is try and put in place things which actually provide information to allow a better informed decision to occur. We also have to have funding. So for example, the Combating Drugs Partnerships, the main implementation of From Harm to Hope. From Harm to Hope said it should reduce supply, so tough enforcement. It should build a world-class treatment system, so effective treatment. It also said it should cut generational demand for drugs. So, in my terms, prevention. And it's a tragedy that only 70% of the combating drugs partnerships in the country have prevention as part of what they do. So there's 30% of the country which are meant to be implementing From Harm to Hope, but they don't have this key element in it. It's a tragedy that this never gets talked about. You know, when was the last time you heard the Home Secretary talk about drugs? When was the last time you heard the Prime Minister talk about the problem of drugs on our streets? Because it is political, because it is difficult, because people don't like it, and very, very well-connected people don't like it. I know that it is the one thing, my stance, particularly on cannabis, which is the one thing which has meant I've had death threats. It's the one thing where somebody asked this panel to fire me. It is not a popular position amongst the people who want this issue to continue. And the problem is, the harm of the individual drugs is not well known. My background in pharmaceuticals, I was in charge of ketamine, right? That is on the rise in the UK. That should only be used as an anesthetic unless it's proven elsewhere using drug trials that it's useful elsewhere. What it does, and we have young people endorse it, is it will rot your equipment from the bladder to the outside. I've got at least a couple of kids I've been told about who are in Dorset having to wear nappies for the rest of their life because of that. That's well known. That's been known for years. I knew it as a product manager. Cannabis. It's been known to be a genetic poison, a genotoxin. But nobody ever talks about that. Nobody ever talks about the increase in birth defects. Nobody talks about the increase in cancer. Nobody talks about the mental health issues. The OCGs say it'll make you feel better. That's their way of working with kids to get them involved in it. You feel a bit down, oh, I got something for you. Oh, that didn't work. Oh, I'll have a bit of... And that's how the addiction train continues. Now, the day that government actually says we're going to do something seriously about this is the day I will run the flag up the flagpole. In the meantime, I'm spending quite a piece of what I've got locally to make certain that we've got good messaging going into our schools. I've got 6 things happening in Dorset. I'm presenting to the rest of the Southwest next week about these 6 things because we've had to pick our battles. We've picked the battle of young people and illegal gateway drugs. We're not touching the dinner party set, if I can use that stereotype, and cocaine. That needs to be addressed. We're not addressing the issue of the risk on our roads. There was a lady in the Echo only, I think, last week who died because somebody had got in a car or a van, I can't remember which, OD'd on cannabis. Until we grip this, and we do it in the round as a country, then we'll still have the problem. But I'm on the same page as you are, sir.
Thank you for your response, Commissioner. Thank you for your question, Councillor Starr. We are in danger of opening quite a contentious subject here in the approach to this. I certainly have my own views. In terms of clamping down on end drug users, we brought in the Misuse of Drugs Act more than 50 years ago. We've had half a century of a war on drugs that has failed. We are appearing to criminalise people who are driven by adverse childhood experiences. I absolutely agree with the emphasis on prevention. But that prevention, as we've heard from the previous paper, we need to prevent adverse childhood experiences. We need to prevent trauma. We need to prevent hopelessness. And really, we need to take a new approach based on international best practice. Commissioner.
So, Chair, we are in danger of having the debate, but I can't let a couple of things there I can't let pass, I'm afraid. Your assertion the war of drugs is lost. The war on drugs is a never-ending war. There is no way out of it with legalization. What would you legalize? In Uruguay, they legalized 10% cannabis. The bad guys sell 20 and 30. The war on drugs will always occur. One of the biggest issues we have in this country now is what's called synthetic opioids. So even if you legalized everything, the bad guys would still have a larger market to sell these evil things into. And probably the most important point is the war of drugs has never been fought because the prevention piece has never been done. Treatment and recovery has been targeted on the end of addiction, at heroin largely, and cocaine. The drug which most kids are in treatment for in this country is cannabis. The war of drugs is won every day when a supplier is taken out of circulation, when somebody gets recovered from drugs, and when we prevent young people and others using them in the first place. So I'm afraid, Chair, I have to disagree with you on this one.
Commissioner, I think this is an area where we will continue to agree to disagree, and I am happy to do that. I think this may be a future key line of inquiry around this particular area, and today and right now is probably not the time for it. But I do appreciate your response.
Very happy to do that, Chair, and perhaps we could have an informal meeting about this whole issue. I'd be very happy to have that debate then.
I would look forward to that. Okay, we still have another paper to cover. We have been doing really well for time. Let's see if we can keep that up. So, the next key line of inquiry was around use of technology. This was led by Councillor Bown. I would ask the councillor to give us a quick intro and then ask the PCC to give us a brief intro as well. And we will invite questions on the paper. Councillor Bown.
Is my mic on? Yes, it is. So the root of my questions really came from my experience working for Dorset Police. I used to work in the initial training department, training police officers. Now, I'm sure we all have experience of technology in the workplace being a potential mixed blessing. Obviously, the potential benefits are huge, but we all know there's also potential for us to be working for that technology rather than the technology be working for us. And I wanted to make sure the balance was right. So I would like to thank Mark Eyre for marshalling my disparate thoughts into some piercing questions. So I thank you very much, Mark. But the questions that we came up with were, how is the PCC investing in technology to meet the desired outcomes set out in his police and crime plan? So please provide some case studies. So for each case study, identify how the success of the investment is being monitored in terms of value for money. So I think that value for money really is the same thing as making sure it's good use of police officers' time and indeed civilians. But my thoughts are very much in terms of it being value for money, in terms of the technology being worthwhile and not an extra burden. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, I also will add my thanks, particularly to my Chief Executive, for, again, what I believe is a pretty substantive paper going through the technology for Dorset Police. Technology and policing is something which is needed to be a focus purely for one reason alone. The baddies will constantly innovate their technology to get round the technology which is current. So in the broadest possible sense, the police have to make certain they are innovating in order to address that. I was part of a presentation recently which was the lead on car theft for the APCC, together with Jaguar Land Rover, talking about what is in effect a Cold War between vehicle thieves and the police, and the different sort and what they were doing about it. As each piece of technology is put in place to thwart it, another piece of technology occurs. So we have to constantly make certain we have something to thwart the crooks. That's, if you like, the policey end from the point of view of catching crooks. But a lot of the technology is actually in order to help the police be more efficient, to allow them to have the time to do what we want them to do. And I think this paper really does well highlighting that. It is a complex area when you're talking about large databases. And you see at the start of the paper, it talks about things like the Police Digital Service, Blue Light Commercial, the Home Office, and how those large national schemes interface with us here regionally. Then we go to regional, we start talking about the Minerva program, we've got the National Police Chiefs Council. I mean, the point about it is there's a lot of work done at all levels. But what I'm fascinated by, even with the financial envelope that we have, is Dorset Police can still innovate. And one of the things that we have got in this paper is actually nationally recognized. I think we're probably the second force in the country to use this technology. So I'm very pleased about that. The governance sits, well, it's delineated there, you can see in the paper. So it sits with various boards, which we, as the OPCC, sit on to make certain that it happens. And I think what's important is looking at the three example areas we gave. First of all, robotic process automation. This is an artificial intelligence, because the word robot is a little bit unfortunate there. It's a technological solution to be put into place to make repetitive work taken away from the officers or staff, to allow them to focus on more complex issues. And we've took a decision as Dorset Police and the OPCC to look at this in 2020. There's now been, I think it's 24 separate automations. And that can make a significant difference, not just in reducing the manual activity, but also increasing productivity, reducing errors, reduces the need to carry out additional activity. So I really, really like that one. And that one is one of the areas that is being looked at as a mediation for the issue that we were talking about earlier with the loss of our staff members. But that is kind of an overarching technology being applied across the whole force in different areas to try and make things better. I know that when this was put in with victims, I was with them and they were saying that actually not only has it made it easier from the point of view of the task, but actually victims were getting a better service because of it. Operation Edison is in the paper. I think this is important because this looks at some significant changes. The one I wanted to highlight, because otherwise I'm going to recycle the whole paper, and I'm certain the chair would not like me to do that. The one I wanted to highlight, though, was the enhanced video response, so EVR. This is the one where we're one of the leaders in the country. It's an alternative to traditional physical attendance of officers and investigators to victims and witness locations. But let's be clear, if a victim or witness wants to see an officer, they still will. This is not replacing that, it is an additional option. So, for example, you have a busy work diary, you've had something happen to you, You can actually set have the appointment with the officer at a time that suits you in your office or at home or wherever, which is far better than waiting for somebody to bang on your door. There are also situations where having a police car outside may not be useful. I'm thinking, for example, there may be certain domestic abuse situations where the last thing you want is to flag that. And you can, again, do this. So how it works is it's assessed as a grade 3 deployment, so it requires engagement within 48 hours. That means this is faster as well, because in some cases, because of further operational needs, police officers would take longer than the 48 hours. Victim satisfaction increased from 31% to 74%. Positive outcomes, actually addressing the perpetrator, improved from 1.5% to 4.9%. Use of outcome 16, which is a large issue. This is where there's a named offender, but the victim doesn't want to go forward, fell from 36% to 21%. This has been a significant, and we'll start to see the benefits because we haven't put it in for a whole year yet. This is starting to make a real difference. And the other one that I'll just make a point on, and then I'll close, Chair, as I'm certain you'll be happy, is the issue of Pronto. So this is the putting of certain forms and documentation on the mobile phone that the officer takes with them. As a candidate, I went on a job on a 999 call. It was 15 minutes there for a 10-minute call. Nothing huge had happened, but it needed to be logged. 15 minutes back. Then the two officers went on desktop computers separately to put the detail on. Pronto helps remove some of that. And it's now firmly embedded across the force. And the force is pushing hard to get everybody to use it and use it effectively. So your point, I have been on the receiving end of technology which actually takes me longer to do than I did before. This isn't that. I'm very clear that if technology doesn't work, then we don't want it. But let's have as much technology as we can to make the force more effective, more efficient, and by heck, if that capital grant was sorted and we could invest, we'd be able to innovate quicker. So thank you for asking the question. I think it's good to put some light on something which doesn't get talked about very much. And there's a lot of work going on in order to improve the situation with Dorset Police.
Thank you, and again to your team for such an incredibly detailed report. Did you have any follow-up questions, Councillor?
No, just a comment to say, yeah, it was a very thorough response. Thank you.
Do we have further questions around this item? I had a couple of comments that I noted. I think it's fantastic to see Dorset Police driving innovation within this field. I think the delivery for the end users, which is the residents of Dorset, it seems to be approaching a kind of convergence tipping point where we have things like digital evidence management being embedded in single online home, and then automations within these systems where we finally have frictionless reporting mechanisms, which I think is the thing that our residents are really, really crying out for. We're far from frictionless at the moment. Online reporting is taking a priority over phone reporting. We haven't got it right, but this does give me confidence that the direction of travel is right, and we are going to see improvements, I hope, around the reporting piece.
Chair, I think I would agree. I think you have seen the impressive change in the 999 response rate over the last year. Well, 2 years actually. 2 years ago in the summer, 75% of 999 calls were responded within 10 seconds. And then last summer it was 85%, and then this summer we've started hitting the 90%, and now we're regularly hitting 90%. That's one. The other one is the online reporting, which is much slicker than what it was before we had the single online home. It is better now that there is an intelligence tab on the first screen. And I will keep howling about that because that's still, the thing which needs to be publicized in order to help people. Where there is still work to do is around the 101 telephone response. And I've got a meeting tomorrow where I'll see the next iteration of the results around that. And I will be asking, why can't we go faster? Why can't we go quicker? But again, we're in the situation that it's probably around resourcing. So I think if I was to sum up Contact at this moment in time, I would say we are in the meatloaf situation. 2 out of 3 ain't bad, but we're not right yet.
I think there are some easy wins with the technology suites that are coming through. The intelligence tab that you mentioned, I utilise regularly on at least a weekly basis, and I encourage my residents to as well. It's a much briefer, shorter way of people reporting drug deals, suspicious behaviour, things that don't fit into the full 101 online report, which again removes barriers. What it's missing is the digital evidence management piece where people can submit video, they can submit photos that they've taken on their phone. I understand that the DEMS is penciled in for 2025. Would we be able to look forward to those integrations with reporting?
Well, I think it's fair to say that an element of that is already there with the Good SAM system, which was outlined in the technological paper. But the piece there is that it's when the investigating officer goes back to the person having reported it initially. So I think you're right. There is a lot of work to be done in this area still. I'm particularly exercised around the issue of retail crime reporting and shoplifting, which is absolutely mandated to have the video from the CCTV. So yes, I want this to improve. DEMS, I think, is part of it, but I think there's other elements as well. And I'm also very, very clear that, again, this is around resource. The digital team responsible for digitizing elements of what we're talking about, this is outside the DEMS project. So, for example, if I were to talk about the theft pack, we want to change, we want to digitize it. There is 88 things on the task list for that team at the moment. I am pushing hard to get our theft pack, which the business community wants, onto that list. If it's not on the list, then up the list if it is up the list. But if each one of those, as I understand it, takes a week, you can see we're a long way away. Resource would change that. More funding would change that. So, yes. And we will be looking forward to the advantages that DEMS brings us.
I do have a small addition, but I'm conscious that we've approached 1 o'clock and Mark needs to take a vote to extend. I would reassure members that we are very close to the end now, and I wouldn't anticipate it being more than 10 minutes, barring any other spirited debates cropping up in the meantime.
Thanks, Chair. So just to clarify, within our constitution, if we're going to extend or going to exceed the 3 hours, we need to just seek the panel's agreement to go beyond that 3 hour period. So, Chair, we just need to seek a proposer, a seconder, and a show of hands to extend.
I would propose the extension to complete business. I'll take Councillor Canavan got in there by a whisker.
Okay, so yeah, as you say, I don't think we're too far away, but yeah, we can continue.
Thank you. The DEMS use cases that you gave, I think, are good and sound. I think what residents want is this ability to report with multimedia in the palm of their hand. So rather than waiting for a Good Sam EVR interview, that they can, from the very outset that they experience or witness something suspicious, use the recording equipment that they have in their pocket to snap it, upload it, and contribute to that pool of intelligence. That's more of a comment than a question, but yeah, I do appreciate the work that's been done.
I'd like that too. We have elements of it, OpSnap, for example. But what you're actually asking for is a change to single online home. That's a national system. There is a work plan around it. I do know that they are looking at how they can integrate video into it easier and those sorts of things. At our next update with them, I'll make the point again.
That would be appreciated. Thank you. Do we have questions or comments around the technology piece? Okay. Councillor Starr, I apologise. Over to you.
I'd just like to say I'm glad to hear that you're doing something about the 101 service. I think it's pretty dire at the moment, but it will improve, I hope.
Well, pretty dire is unfortunately the way that a lot of residents will see it. The actual numbers is that 70% of the 101 calls get dealt with very rapidly. It's the 30% which cause the trouble. And that's what I'm looking at tomorrow in our use of Police Powers Scrutiny Board, which looks at contact with the public as well. And so that's one of the things that we'll be looking at. There's been an officer in the contact department who has made this a thesis of how to improve it. And has done a lot of work around it. What we do know is that the number of calls which are dropped, people who give up, that is dropping. We're getting less of them, which means that what we're doing is beginning to have an effect. What we haven't done, though, is got the average time down yet. And that is what I'm interested in getting done. So we've got to somehow deal with the 30% which are more complex and make certain that they're dealt with as rapidly as we can. It may be that we reach a state and that's as far as we can go because they are so complex, if you see what I mean. But the time holding on the phone, definitely we should be sorting out. So yes, we will continue to do so.
Councillor Wood.
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick one. How much of an overhead on the budget does the implementation and then maintenance of these technologies have? Is that expected to increase as you get more in? Obviously, there's database storage, all that kind of stuff costing money. How much is liable for Dorset, basically?
So if I understand it, what you're asking is how much do these technologies cost as a percentage of the overall budget? I'm afraid I'm not going to have that technicality in my head. I'm pretty certain Julie doesn't have that technicality in her head. Very happy to take that number away and give it to you after the meeting. We'll come back to you.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have any other comments or questions on this piece? Okay, I would just like to repeat my commendation on this report. It's robust, it's detailed, and it outlines a really ambitious technological agenda. So we'll move on to the next agenda item if everybody's happy with that. So item 8, complaints update. I will pass over to Mark for this one.
Sorry, I shall say that again. Since we last met, there's been one single complaint that was investigated by the monitoring officer for the Office for the Police and Crime Commissioner, and it wasn't upheld. The complainant's been advised, so there's no further action at this time.
Thank you for the update. So there's really nothing to discuss under that agenda item at this time. Item 9, work plan. So as we discussed in our pre-meeting, we've reached the end of our forward work plan. We have our next quarterly panel in February, which is where we will be discussing the precepts. So finances will be very much the focus. We have taken the decision that we will not add an additional work item to that agenda so that we can do a focused and detailed scrutiny of the precepts and the finances. Prior to the next panel meeting, we will be having a workshop on the 14th of January where we will be having guidance with somebody who will train us in financial scrutiny in advance of the precept meeting. We will also be sending a questionnaire out to our members, encouraging them to select their preference of priority lead areas so that we can have an extended workshop where we reallocate priority leads and then rebuild the forward work plan for the coming year. That's a condensed version of the plans for the forward work plan. Is that reasonably clear, and does anyone have any questions or comments? Okay.
Chair, I'd just like to say one small thing. I said I'm an optimist. I absolutely am an optimist. We have spent quite a bit of time at this meeting, and the next meeting we'll spend even more time talking about the financial situation. I think it's important to note that Dorset Police is working well and effectively. Crime is down, positive outcomes are up, antisocial behaviour is down. I could go on. I would not want it thought ever that Dorset Police are not doing a good job. The constraints made by the finances are real. Dorset Police will continue to keep people safe. They will continue to deliver the police and crime plan. But we would be in a much better position if we could sort out the fundamental issue which is facing not just our force, but other forces around the country. I just want to make that point to reassure the public that it's not just about the money. It is about the delivery, which I'm holding the police to account for.
Thank you for that closing statement. And I would invite a response from the panel if anybody has any comments. Councillor Starr.
Personally, I think Dorset Police is doing a very good job, and I think people are safer than they've been for a long time. The thing that annoys me is this fear of crime. There's a lot of people worried about crime that doesn't really exist. I mean, those kids that are hanging around on the corner having a chat are just doing that. They don't want to sit in front of the television with their parents. They would rather chat with their mates. But some people think that is somehow a threat. But it's not helped by, I think, by the fact that most daytime television seems to consist of crime things about, ex-policemen warning you about different things, what you should be worried about. But there isn't that much to worry about. We're in a good place. It could always get better, and I'm sure it will. But we're not doing too badly. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment, Councillor Starr. Do we have any other comments? Let me see. In which case, I'd like to move on to urgent items, if that's okay. Which I believe we have none anticipated at this stage. Do we have any exempt business? Do we have any other business? Then I would like to thank everybody for their contribution. I'd like to thank the PCC and the Office of the PCC and all of the members for engaging in a good, lively, spirited debate at times. I have every confidence in this panel